In this video, we're going to talk about files. A file is just some data that you store someplace so you can use it later. In all the programs we run so far, we haven't had to do that. We've either gotten information from the keyboard or created it in the program, but the next time we ran the program, we were starting from scratch. Most of the time, if you're using a computer, you're probably going to be dealing with large amounts of data, and you don't want to have to enter that data from the keyboard every time, so we store it out on a file in a secondary memory device. And secondary memory device is basically, that means non-volatile, so you don't have to have the power on like you do with the main memory of a computer. So a hard disk is permanent, it gets magnetized. An optical disk is permanent, you get little holes actually burnt in the disk. Magnetic tape is magnetized. Flash memory is permanent. So a file can be stored on any one of those devices, but the nice thing about a file is it lets us save data so we can use it next time. We've got a handful of functions here, or methods for files. We're not going to be doing output to a file. We're just going to be reading from data files that have already been created. And so we're going to kind of skip over the right one here. We've got some options for reading from a file, and the N here, if you read over here, it is the number of characters you want to read. We're not going to use that at all. So there are several ways to get it. We can get the whole thing, and it could be a very long file, as one humongous string. I don't think we're going to do that one. We can do read line, which will let us step through the file one line at a time. And if you don't know how long the line is, then that makes no sense. So this will read up to and including the end of line marker. When you hit the enter key, a marker goes at the end of the line, and it'll include that. This one, I kind of like this one, as long as your file isn't too big. It returns a list of strings, and each line is going to be a string in a list of strings. So if the file is 10 lines long, you will have a list that has 10 strings in it. And then you can step through your list, which we know how to do, and process each string at a time. And basically what you're doing is you're processing one line of the file at a time. Okay. So here's a little bit of code. This is to read the whole thing, and we're not going to do that one. This is to read a line. This one is to read all of the lines, and we're going to do that one. So let's copy this one. And I'm going to flip over to my editor. I do not have Spider available anymore. I've tried it quit working on me, and I've tried uninstalling and reinstalling, and it's still not working. So I've temporarily at least switched over to another editor here. So let's paste that in. So these are basically the only two things you need to know. If you want to open the file, you need to know the name of the file. You pass the name as a string to the open function, and it will return what's called a file handle. And the file handle is something that simply lets you access the file. So it lets you get a grip on the file, I guess. So it's called a file handle. This can be any place, but if you don't put any path information in front of it, it needs to be in the same folder as your program is. Otherwise, we won't be able to find it. So the easiest way to do it is just put it in the same folder as your program. And then, so now we've got the file handle. Once you get the file handle has some built-in methods. One of them is called read lines. And this will read all the lines, and it'll return a list of strings. Okay? So we're going to try that. And to find out what we get back, I'm just going to print whatever gets returned. So let's go ahead and run. And so here's our output window, and we get a list of, looks like we have a list that's a list of strings. So here's the first string, and here's the second string, and we've got this \n on the end. When Python reads in a text file, what it does is it reads in that end of line marker as well. The end of line marker is normally an invisible character, but it displays it as \n. So it displays it as two characters. In reality, that's only one character that's in there, and it only shows up when we look at the string like this. If we were to print the string out, it would print out, and then it would see that return on the end, and it would go down to a new line automatically, and basically you'd get an extra blank line in there. Okay, let's flip back over, and I'm not sure why I put the square brackets around lines here. That's why it came out as a list of who had a list that had one component that was a list of strings. If I run this now, which I probably should do, that extra set of square brackets is gone. So here is element 1 of my list. And then there's a comma, and here's element 2 of my list, and there's a comma. So we got strings, and they're separated by commas, and it's a list. Okay. So now that I've got that, there is another neat command that will let you split up the things that are in the list, that are in the string. So before we do that, let's just step through the lines list. So we'll do a little for loop. And I'm going to call it line in lines. Oops. So for every line that's in the lines list, what do I want to do? I'm just going to print it out for right now. So I think those are nice names. They look pretty much the same, so you got to be a little bit careful. But lines refers to all of the lines as a list, and line refers to one of the strings. Okay, so let's run that. And this is what we get. So it's printing out one line at a time in a print statement. The print statement says go to a new line, but there was also a new line character on the end here, so we're basically saying go to a new line twice. That's why it's all double space. That is real easy to fix. Let's just go back here and before we print it, let's actually change it. So let's do line equals line. I want everything from the beginning up to the last character, but not including the last character. And the last character is character number -1. So if I run this now, I get everything single-spaced. Okay, so we're making progress. So you can step through everything in your list of strings. Each string is one line. And so this is a way to retrieve it. Now let's do something else with it after I've got it. I don't need the print here anymore because I know I'm getting the data out correctly, so we'll get rid of that. What I do want to do, though, is I want to take the data that's in a string and I want to break it up. If you look carefully at the file, there are 11 items on each line in the file. There's the first name, the last name, and I think the position, and the team, and completions, and attempts, and total yards, and a couple of other things. And I want to pick those off. And that would normally be a lot of work, but it's not. Not with one of the built-in functions in Python. So I'm going to make up something called QB for quarterback, and I'm going to say I want to take that line and I want to split it up. Okay. The split function will take line and it will split it up based on white space. Okay, white space is either spaces or tabs. And all we have out there is spaces. So every place where it finds one or more spaces, it's going to split. And what it's going to return is a list in QB. And so QB is now a list of 11 items. It's the individual fields that were there. So now I'm going to print QB. And I should get a list of strings. So where there was one long string before, this started off as one long string representing one line of the file. This is going to be one list that has 11 strings in it. So when I print this out, that's what I should get. So here is a list. It's got 11 strings in it. String 0 is the first name. String 1 is the last name. Then I've got the position. I've got the team, and so on. So now I can access the individual components in here. That's pretty much the whole idea. So we want to be able to access the individual fields that are in that file. So now let's do print, and we will do the first name, QB sub 0. We will do the last name, which is QB sub 1. And then we'll do a colon, and then we will print their quarterback rating, which was the next to last item. So QB sub -2. Or was it the last one? I think it was the last one. -1. We'll find out in a second here. And we'll put a period on the end for good grammar and punctuation, and not a curly bracket, a parenthesis. Okay, so that should print out the quarterbacks and their ratings, I think, if the rating was the last item. Let's go ahead and run it. And we are getting, let me see, let's go to the top here, start with the first one. So Colt McCoy, 74.5, that was their rating. This is their completion percentage. So it is giving us exactly what we want. Okay. Item number 0, item number 1, item number -1. Okay. Now we've got strings here, not numbers, but they can be converted into numbers by using int for the integers here. And we can do float for the floating point numbers, although on this one we have to make sure we stripped off the percent sign at the end because it doesn't like percent signs. It just wants digits and decimal points and maybe a plus or minus sign. So we're going to go through here one more time. And all we're going to do is this time we're going to pull off the completions, convert it into an int. We're going to pull off the attempts and convert it to an int. We're going to divide the two, and we're going to check to see if it's equal to this item right here. So item 0, 1, 2, 3. I want items 4 and 5, and then I want the second item from the end to compare. So let's, after we split, let's do completions equals, I think that was the fourth one I said. That's going to give me a string though, so I want to make it into an int. And attempts was the next item. Convert that into an int, and then my percentage is equal to the completions divided by the attempts. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to print out, not this, I want to print out the percent that I computed, and it's going to be a decimal, and you know what? I need to multiply it by 100 because their number is to multiply by 100 as well because it's a percent. So I'm going to take percent, multiply it by 100, and then I want to print it out. I'll do 0 for the total width, which means it'll take up just as much as it needs, and I'll do a period. And they had one digit to the right of the decimal point, and then an F. And that should give me the percentage that I computed, and then we will also do the percentage that they computed, which is the second item from the end, which would be item -2, and close off the curly bracket. And that's a string, so I don't need to put any decimal information or field width or anything like that. So we don't need this last print statement anymore, so we will get rid of that. Now let's go ahead and run it. And down at the bottom, we should have our percentages and theirs. And it looks like we calculated everything correctly. We just left off the percent sign. That's not a big deal. We just go back into our Q string here, and after we print out the field, we print out a percent sign, and now we'll run it again. And actually, I'm going to just get rid of this one now, too. We don't need that anymore. Go ahead and run. There it is. Everything is pretty much exactly the same. Let's do one more thing to make it just a little bit easier to read. Let's print out the name. Let's do something like this. Let's do name equals QB sub 0 plus, I want a space in between, plus QB sub 1. Okay? And that's going to be a string. And I kind of like to have this all line up real nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do dot, and I want that justified. I'm going to have it right justified so the right side will all line up together. So we're going to do r just, and hope 25 characters is enough. And now down in my F string here, instead of printing out QB sub 0 and QB sub 1, I'm going to print out name. And it should already be right aligned in the field. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. Let's go ahead and run it. And there. And it looks like 25 was plenty of space. Ben Roethlisberger looks like the longest name, and that's probably about, close to 10 spaces in. But it's pretty easy to format. Everything looks pretty good. So working with files is pretty simple. A file is just a collection of lines. A line is a string. And if you do the read lines thing, then you get a collection of strings in a list. We know how to step through a list. We know how to split a string. We know how to step through a string and convert strings into numbers. So the only really new stuff here is opening the file, which is very straightforward, reading the lines into a list, and then we've got our typical for loop for stepping through a list of lines, a list of any items. And then the other new thing here is split, which is really, really handy. So it splits everything up based on white space. And that is the basics of dealing with files in Python.